Why I chose this subject was because one of the things that I keep alluding to, and which I often say to people and they don't understand it, is the fact that the driving test is not about your ability to drive. If you're a racing driver, it doesn't mean you'll pass this test. You can be the best driver on earth, you can be a rally driver, you can do all those sort of things, but it still doesn't mean you are going to pass this test if you haven't put in place the correct procedures. And the examiners have a standard that they are marking against and that they are measuring when they are doing the actual driving test. And your job is to convince the examiner that you are going to drive to that safety requirement that is necessary. So when you look at this, you've got to understand from your side as a student is to understand what the driving examiner's role is and what your role is. And honestly, the driving examiner's role is to actually see. He's only got around about 35 minutes. The test is normally regarded as 38 minutes, but he's got about 35 minutes to actually make a decision whether you are safe to drive on the road or not. And if you get any serious faults at all in that process, then you can end up in a situation where that examiner is going to fail you because he hasn't seen you drive to standard. Okay, so what I want you to think about this fact that that examiner has got a really short period of time to make a decision whether you can drive safely on the road. And during that period of time, he's got to get an evaluation of your ability to drive, which is this driving craft thing, and whether you are going to be driving to the safety levels that are required by them. And if you're ticking all the boxes. Now, one of the things I want to put in here, which I really want to highlight for everybody, is one of the main things about driving is not a conscious process. Driving is in actual fact a habitual process. In the beginning, when you're a young driver and you're starting to drive, it is a thinking process. There's a lot of thinking that goes into it. But you've got to think of driving on the same level. You've got to think of driving on the same level as what walking is. Because just think of this. When you start walking, when you learn to walk, you fall, you hit your head on the table, you've got to think about it, you've got to concentrate, you use tables to stand up against you, you've got to think about it, and those sort of things. But when you get to an age of 3 or 4 years old, you're no longer thinking about walking, running, and jumping. Your body has learned, your subconscious has learned how to do those things. And believe me, driving is exactly the same. The problem, though, is that the habits that you learn are going to make a difference to your level of safety that you drive at. And you are going to get to a stage where you don't physically and mentally engage in the driving process anymore. Because when you're actually driving, it's habitual, it's habit, it's subconscious. Your subconscious is doing it. And that's why I have this building repetitive sequences on there. Because if you have a repetitive sequence, if you build, and remember, for your brain to learn habitual processes, the best way your brain learns habitual processes is by actually doing a repetitive task and doing it the same way all the time. Now, as long as that repetitive task has an enhanced safety process in it, you don't have a problem with getting your brain to understand it. But let me give you an example. Somebody asks you to pull up on the left-hand side of the road. Now, if you pull up on the left-hand side of the road and you don't have a fixed sequence in shutting down the car, you will put off the signal and then maybe take it out of gear and then put on the handbrake, or you might do it in a different sequence. Now, the learning process, the habitual part of the learning process, if you don't keep to a fixed sequence in that small section of time, the habitual process becomes more difficult for your brain to learn because you're not doing it repetitively in the same way. Now, a proper procedure for shutting down the car when you've pulled up on the side of the road is in actual fact to start by applying the handbrake, putting the car in park, and then switching off the signal. Now, whether you turn some of that around, the signal always has to come off last, but you must do it in a habitual process. You mustn't, now you put on the handbrake and then you put the car in park, or now you do it the other way around. Once you start mixing those things up, your brain doesn't learn as quickly as when you've got a habitual process. So in reality, you must sequence certain parts of your driving into habitual processes. And that's why we have acronyms like identify, mirror, signal, maneuver, or position, speed, look, or there are lots of acronyms there. But the reason you are being taught acronyms is because you are developing, hopefully developing, safe habitual processes, which then become subconscious applications. Once you have really safe habitual processes, those habitual processes can be committed to your subconscious, and the repetitive process of going through those are now of a nature that it is easier to learn. And the other thing too is when you're now in the driving test, if you have the proper habitual processes, you don't have to think about them. You don't have to check that you're doing them. You just do them because that's what you have taught yourself to do, and you do it in your subconscious.
Hi there! If you're enjoying this video and want to see more, head over to www.bds.ac, our interactive video e-learning platform. With BDS Academy, you can learn to drive online from the comfort of your home at your own pace, saving you both time and money. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.bds.ac today. We'll see you there.